afternoon. I want to thank everyone again for this opportunity to talk about education today. I also want to compliment Anna and Stephanie on their great talks last night. They're very inspirational.
And I agree with everything they said. So I'm a mom. I'm a product of public schools. I have 3 children in the Shawnee Mission School District. I have a 12-year-old and 2, actually, since I turned in my information, they're 10 now, twins. So I put my kids in school. We were busy. And then I became a PTA legislative liaison. And that was actually right as the cuts were starting to hit with the recession. And so I was seeing with my own eyes cuts that were occurring in my district. And yet then I was reading the paper or seeing on the TV news that funding is up. That funding was up. And yes, I will admit, our side generally admits overall funding is up. But at the same time, our districts are making cuts. The base is down. So I was seeing actual cuts. My jaw is dropping as I'm seeing the coverage. And I became familiar with a man named Dave Trabert. And he's also telling me how there are no problems with funding in Kansas schools. And he's getting quoted in the papers, and he's commenting on commenting online, and I felt like we need to get our information out there, that our side is not getting the information out there. And people who aren't PTA legislative liaisons need to be able to understand what's going on. And I have parents in my school who would do anything for their kids, and yet they don't really seem to be responding to what's going on. So Game On arose out of a parent engagement effort at my children's elementary school. I know a lot of people hate politics. I don't like politics. And so we thought, well, let's try like a sports analogy. So we said, game on for Kansas schools. So we're not at war, okay, and it's not a fight, and it's maybe not politics, it's sports, it's a game. So we want everyone to get off the field, get onto the field, get in the game, and get engaged. So we've grown from our little group to a statewide outreach effort. We are nonpartisan. We have Republicans, Democrats, and independents. We're not zealots. I don't believe money grows on trees. We're taxpayers. I don't believe our schools are perfect. We have work to do. We have a leadership group of about 20 parents, teachers, school board members, concerned community members. And then we have a broader network of Facebook followers. We're at 3,700 this morning, so 8 new ones today. And more now, right? We have an email list of about 6,000, and we have over 700 Twitter followers. We also have a website where we have an issues page, among other aspects. You can connect to legislators by clicking through our website. And the Facebook page is the main place we communicate, and the website. I copy over the Facebook posts onto the web, because I know a lot of people are not on Facebook. So the issues we see as the largest issues right now are funding, with a related issue of judicial selection and blocking attempts at amending the Constitution, and opposition to the ALEC agenda Florida reform model privatization schemes, including vouchers, proliferation of charters, and other bad education policy. We have a continued attempt to educate people about what's at stake and encourage them to get in the game. So right now I'm going to show you a little introduction to Game On.
Physical therapist.
I want to be a math teacher.
An author. A doctor, a scientist.
I'm going to be a veterinarian because I love animals. I like to be challenged.
It's every parent's wish that our children will have the chance to do better.
We can't afford to limit our children's access to a solid public education.
I am very concerned about the state of our public schools today.
Public schools are under attack by forces who are pushing privatization, and this is not for the benefit of the students.
Funding is currently below the level that was established by the legislature's own studies.
For the last few years, the state of Kansas has lowered the funding for public schools Our current 2-year budget underfunds education by $1 billion.
We're losing good teachers because class sizes are so large.
It's getting more difficult to be a teacher.
I'm having to pay for more supplies out of my own pocket.
I'm an elementary art teacher, and every year for the last 3 years my budget has been cut. I'm now teaching with $600 for 550 students. That's $1.09 a student.
We need your help because we can't vote.
Get involved.
Join the conversation.
It's about providing every child with an excellent education.
Learn all you can about public school funding.
Let's do this.
Okay, so why am I here today? I can't cover everything, but I'm going to give you the big picture. Our public schools are being threatened. So threat number one, overall funding, yes, it's up, but capers, catch-up, building funds, and inflation are eating up the increase. The base state aid per pupil has been cut. It was cut during the recession. It was cut again after Brownback took office. They're raising it $14 this year, but that's not enough. Funding is not keeping up with our students' needs. The cuts during the recession were real. To hear some speak, the only kinds of cuts that are real are tax cuts. All the other cuts are figments of our imagination. But as Mark Shalman has explained in a recent piece, when measured against changes in the cost of living, funding for educational programs that can actually be spent on teachers, administrators, and student support programs has declined by $500 million since 2009. And increases approved in 2014 will be less than inflation. In my district, those cuts have been, we reduced 400 employees, including regular and special education teachers. We closed an enhanced learning center, that's the gifted program, and reduced staffing there. We've increased the class cap. We've eliminated funding for library books. We've reduced janitor hours so that janitors only clean our classrooms once every 3 days. And as a mother of elementary school children during flu season, that's significant. We've increased fees for all-day kindergarten and for busing. As I've traveled around the state promoting Game On in our efforts, I've learned other districts have also increased class sizes, cut programs and extracurriculars, cut the length of the school year, cut the length of the school week, and cut teacher training. Those cuts have not been restored. And with the tax cuts that we have, this is likely to get worse. We are left asking what is going to get cut next. At the same time, our needs are increasing. We're being told we need to produce students who can compete globally and support themselves in an era when a high school education is not going to be enough. We have more students living in poverty and English language learners who need extra resources. Everything costs more. Schools are employers and consumers. We have technology, security, special education, and curriculum needs that didn't exist in the past. That's our reality. A second threat we face is the ALEC agenda, the Florida reform model. If you're not already familiar with ALEC, please read up. And Bill Moyers actually has an excellent television program, United States of ALEC, that really gives a good overview. But I'm assuming that a decent number of you are familiar with ALEC, but I can assure you that you can walk into pretty much any school or any community and you will run into people, the majority, have never heard of ALEC and have no idea what they're up to in Kansas. They're Koch funded and they're strongly represented in our legislature and with our governor. They promote low taxes, free markets, and privatization of public entities, including schools. The Kansas Policy Institute is their local ALEC mouthpiece. They feed manipulated information and bills directly to legislators. They tell the story of failing schools to promote the diversion of funds from public schools to charter schools, tax credits for private school tuition, and other bad policy. The tax credit scholarship provision inserted into House Bill 2506 was an ALEC bill. It provides up to $7 million in tax credits, which come out of the state general fund, to give money to non-public schools without any provisions for accountability of those schools.
And there's an especially derpy factor of it. Students with IEPs are eligible, it's low income and IEPs, but there are no provisions in that legislation that the schools those children go to actually provide services to meet those IEPs. And we're pretty sure that neo-charters are next on the agenda. They got their tax credit scholarship, it's next. So we're preparing to see a massive push for the proliferation of charters, and these are not the charters that we've had in the past. These are charters that have nonprofit names, and then they're managed by for-profit organizations behind them. Abundant research and stories from around the country show these programs are failing. They're not getting better results. They're not doing it for less. There are numerous scandals, everything from financial mismanagement, insider deals, inadequate academic services, cherry-picking students, low enrollments of higher needs students, and high attrition rates. It's also unreasonable to say that we can't afford the system we have, and yet we want to fund an entirely separate system. The same voices arguing for consolidation in rural Kansas are pushing for dual systems in Wichita. The third threat I see is the assault on our judicial system and our Constitution. I know this is going to be covered elsewhere this afternoon, and Ryan also touched on it, but it has a direct impact on education. We've seen attempts to change how judges are selected so judges who support school funding don't get onto the bench. We've also seen the appointment of Caleb Stegall. He was a legal scholar for the Kansas Policy Institute and has publicly stated that our public school spending is excessive. He's advocated for limiting judicial review and promoting school choice. And he will be on the panel now that hears the adequacy part of the Gannon decision. So as Ryan also mentioned, they've already changed how judges are appointed to the lower courts. But again, there are a lot of people who have no idea that that has already occurred. They've also made attempts to remove school funding from judicial review, and there have been attempts to eliminate the suitable funding language from the Constitution. I'd like to talk for a moment also about House Bill 2506. I know a lot of you are familiar with it, but it was passed in the final hours of the 2014 session to comply with the equity funding ordered by the Kansas Supreme Court in the Gannon case. There was a clean bill passed by the House, but the Senate found the idea of school funding so repulsive that it insisted on adding additional harmful policy, including the elimination of due process and the Alex tax credit scholarships and other provisions. They also partially funded it by cutting at-risk funding. They added an LOB increase so that they could claim that some money was going to the classrooms. But the LOB, we must remember, is an increase on local property tax. So part of the game here is that they're taking credit for low state income tax, while at the same time having districts raise property taxes. And I recommend that we stay on watch for our school board members to be attacked as tax increasers in their next elections. So poor districts did receive property tax relief and some funding. Other districts had a mix of loss and gain funding, partially depending on their community's ability to pass the LOB. My district, Shawnee Mission, fairly able to pass an LOB, but even with that, my district is proposed to receive $3 million out of House Bill 2506. But we lost $28 million in annual operating funds in 3 successive cuts during the recession. So I'd give back 2506 and just restore the recession-era cuts. So we education advocates have some obstacles. First, we have our supporters' aversion to politics. There's a game being played, we just not feeling a team. So we gotta change that. We also have a lot of legislators who view education as a cost rather than an investment. Our opponents are doing a really good job of promoting their story over ours. We hear our schools are failing, and despite increasing funds, scores are stagnant. But we should be hearing that despite inadequate funding and increasing numbers of students in poverty and English language learners, Kansas scores are holding steady. That's an accomplishment. There's also a great lack of transparency. I don't know if you've seen postcards lately. Everyone is pro-education. Did you know that? But we know that's not true. But the votes aren't easy to access. The bill names are often deceptive. There's also a great deal of spin, manipulated and selective use of data, relabeling funding that's always been there, but now it's called state funding, and deceptive charts, often using that change in funding. Our opponents have large amounts of funding and direct access to legislators. And our advocates, our advocate partners, are all accused of having motives. Superintendents are lining their own pockets. Teachers, as we know, are union thugs. And Trolls. And actually, I will say that story that came out yesterday in the Eagle, that was actually a game-on parent who made those comments. It was not a teacher. But that's the impression, that if anyone is advocating for public schools, they must be one of these groups that are lining their own pockets or protecting their own self-interest, instead of some of us parents sticking our necks out and trying to do what we know is right for our children. So we also have a lot of limits on communication. Our PTAs, our school boards, and our superintendents really can't appear political. So that means we need your help. This is a grassroots effort, and we need you guys to all help us amplify our voices. So I have some specific requests from you. Get informed. Read the papers. Get on Twitter. Follow organizations covering education issues. These groups have websites, Facebook feeds, and Twitter feeds. Kansas Association of School Boards. Dwayne Gosen has a new blog called The Kansas Budget. Kansas Center for Economic Growth. Reroute the Roadmap has an excellent blog. Follow Game On and other grassroots groups. Andover Parent Legislative Council, Educate Lawrence, Derby Page, Goddard Advocates for Public Education, Defend the American Dream, Kansas Public Schools, and Kansas Families for Education are among groups. Form your own local education advocacy group. If you want help getting started, we've helped other groups get off the ground, and we're happy to do that. Talk to your district and inform parents in your district and find out what's being cut in your district. Get in touch with your legislators and stay in touch during the legislative session. Share information. This is the big part. I know a lot of you guys are already informed and engaged, but we have to share information with our friends, family, and neighbors. We're Kansans, we don't discuss politics and religion, we're polite. But now I'm asking you to politely discuss politics. On the soccer field, in the theater, wherever you are, go ahead and do it. Encourage other prominent members of your community to be vocal. Write letters to the editor. Vote and encourage your friends to vote, and that includes the primaries. There are forces at work that do not value public education as much as we do. They are organized, funded, and aggressively pursuing their agenda. We need to get our team on the field, standing up, speaking out, and voting. My oldest daughter is a year older than Lindsay. The first round of recession cuts hit as she entered second grade. Most of her education has been in a recession-like climate. Our kids can't go back to sixth grade later. They're missing opportunities to maximize their potentials now. They need your help.